So the other day I was thinking about My Hero Academia Season 5 and I started rambling some thoughts off and I decided to record myself and it turned into a nearly 40-minute long ramble. So here's what I came up with. It was not scripted, it was not edited, these are just my thoughts. Spoiler free for the manga, but obviously spoilers ahead for My Hero Academia Season 5. Please enjoy. So, I have some thoughts. We're gonna go through it somewhat chronologically. We're gonna start with arcs as a whole, and then we'll slowly start to break it down chapter by chapter simply because of the way it's formatted. It kind of unintentionally forces you to do that because at the end the chapters are so packed with things, they're so separated that you kind of have to, you can't think of them as an entire arc. So let's hop right into it. Starting off, let's talk about the recap episode. Obviously, recap episodes don't really matter. They are just there to fill an episode and introduce the characters and their quirks again. But this recap episode was kind of special because, in my opinion, it was the worst one. And I wouldn't be shitting on a recap episode otherwise, but like, when you actually think about it too much, this episode sort of foreshadowed a lot of the issues that this season ended up having. And I find that interesting because hindsight is 2020, so going into it now with like everything we know of how the season turned out, this episode is, it's interesting. There is a lot of breaking up, which is just personally what I don't like it. Like, every few seconds they introduce a new character. I know people never liked the 2-minute wall of dialogue to introduce Class A, like, one at a time right after the other. But I prefer that to this because the episode itself is actually really cute. Like, the kids doing a training exercise, the big three show up. It's a lot of fun. But yeah, breaking it up really kills the pace for this. The other thing is a lot of flashbacks. There's a 2-minute Endeavor flashback at the start, and little did we know that that was some genius foreshadowing for episode 105. We'll talk about that later. But yeah, otherwise, it was an interesting way to start the season. Not bad, but definitely not great. The next one, episode 90, we continue with the one more thought on the recap episode. The recap starts a new trend as well, which is showing the after effects and then showing how we got there through a flashback, which is kind of how they handled MVA. Because in the manga, what happens is as soon as Endeavor's fight ends, Dabi shows up and does his thing. And then we go to him and Hawks talking at the docks, and then Endeavor wakes up and is talking to Hawks again on the streets. In the anime, season 4 ends with Endeavor, like, winning the fight. And then Deku talks us out with some added narration, which is fine because it's the end of the season, blah, blah, blah. And then this season picks it up the day after, where the kids are talking about the fight. And then we see Endeavor in the hospital bed thinking back to when Dabi showed up, which is kind of weird. Obviously things will be cut from manga to anime, but I was kind of looking forward to seeing Class 1A's reaction to Dabi on the news. And it also kind of makes the scene unclear later, where Redestro is talking about how Dabi said a comment about the Nomu, like he started to pick it up, because we don't know that that was filmed. But before, we knew, yes, the news cameras have caught his appearance, so not great. But yeah, the recap episode just kind of had that weird unintended consequence. Whatever. Anyways, on to episode 90, finishing up the Pro Hero arc from last season. Besides the cuts and the fact that the Dabi thing was now a flashback, I do think the episode was handled pretty well. At the time I thought it was a bit rushed, but looking back on it now, I'm not really sure what they could have done differently. So I think it's fine. Honestly, I like the All for One flashback. I like seeing the Todoroki siblings. And I like seeing Dabi animated with a round chin. On to episode 91, joint training arc starts, and I'm not going to do them episode by episode. So the joint training arc as a whole was very good. The only thing I can complain about in terms of pacing is that match 2 is very stretched out. There's a part where, not a part, the episodes, basically, the 2 episodes of episode 2 are, you can tell they ran out of content in the second one because they put a lot of flashbacks, and I don't think they had to do that. But watching it overall is fine, but just as you're watching the second one, you're like, they probably could have condensed this. But other than that, I thought all the other episodes of the joint training arc were good. They were well animated. They were very fun. I like seeing the kids. If you like the kids, if you're willing to meet Class B, then this is just like your slow down arc. Let's meet the kids. Let's get to know them. Let's learn what's going on at UA outside of Class 1A. And it's a ton of fun. I love it. I love the characters. Match 2, little drawn out, but otherwise everything else was great. Well animated, overall well paced. I can forgive them for putting those little recaps in the cold opening of the episodes. A smaller detail that I wanted to comment on and compliment was the way they handled the beginning of match 3. That's the one with Todoroki and Ida. I really liked how they put the flashbacks to their training in the same episode. So if you don't remember what I'm talking about, in the first episode of match 3, there's these 2 flashbacks. One of them is to Shoto's childhood, and then the other is to Ida just after the provisional license exam. And in the manga, these flashbacks are separated quite a bit. I don't remember the exact chapter numbers, but the Shoto one is in one, there's a chapter in between, and then the Ida one is in the next chapter. But I really like that they put them in the same episode, simply because it really made me, personally, realize the similarities between them in a way that I didn't quite register in the manga. Like, when you think about it, the flashbacks do cover very similar situations. So both kids are from pro-hero families, and you know, they're both trying to learn this special move from one of their relatives. And there's this idea of, are they old enough, where Endeavor tells Shoto, stop pretending to be weak, you can do this, and he's 5 or 6. And then Ida, who is 15 or 16 at the time, has his mother say, oh, I don't know, I still feel like he's too young, kind of showing the difference between a parent who is supporting their child gradually versus what Endeavor was like when Shoto was very young. As well, there's that idea of their motivations for teaching them at all. Tenya's brother seems to be teaching him from a genuine desire to help him be stronger, and like he sees an issue and he's like, oh, I have something that could maybe help with that. Whereas Endeavor's very much came from the idea of, you must surpass me. This is for Endeavor's ambition alone. It will help Shoto be a better hero, but that's not why Endeavor's teaching it to him. You also kind of get an interesting parallel between their brothers, because Tenya's older brother Tensei appears in the flashback, and you know, he can't be a hero anymore, he's aware of that, but he nevertheless wants to help his brother take on his mantle and like be his successor. Whereas in the Todoroki flashback, they do mention Shoto's older brother Toya, but kind of in a way that implies Shoto is supposed to replace him. It's not carrying on this amazing legacy. It's not something that Endeavor's doing out of like respect for his other son. It's very much like, okay, that was a mistake. We're gonna pretend that didn't happen and we're just gonna focus on Shoto. So yeah, small tangent there, but that was a really small detail that I loved. I love that they put those flashbacks in the same episode. It's just really cool. So yeah, that was something they did really well. I think the whole joint training arc did really good like character moments, because it is like very character driven arc. The one thing I have to complain about is the end of the arc, just after the Black Whip episode, where the way it ends, because this kind of foreshadows an issue with the end of the season, which I'll of course talk about later. So match 5 ends and Class A has won the entire training exercise. And episode 99 ends with Aizawa talking to Shinso and telling him, keep doing your best. And Shinso says, yeah, okay. And then it ends. And I remember when this came out, I was trying to figure out if there was like a translation error, and because sometimes the subtitles have translation errors, they're subbed very quickly. And that's fine, you can forgive that. Where it becomes an issue though, is that I couldn't tell if this was the scene where Shinso was accepted into the hero course. And the answer is that no, it wasn't. That came at the beginning of next episode, episode 100. And it is snuck in so quickly that you can miss it. And it's treated like not a big deal. Like if there was anything to play, you know, that violin you say run over, I don't know what that track is called, but you know the one. If there was any moment to play that song, that's it. Like the whole point of joint training, the thematic point, is for Shinso to get into the hero course. Of course, it's also to introduce Black Whip and stuff, and we get some characterization for other things that matter later on, like Tokoyami being close with Hawks and Midnight thinking Yaoyorozu will be a good leader. But the Shinso thing is like what we go into the arc expecting to know. Will Shinso get accepted? And for the arc to not end with that, and for that to just be thrown in the beginning of the next episode, it's just an odd choice. Like, they absolutely could have written it so that it ended on that moment. I think that would have been such a more powerful ending, but they didn't do that. Moving on from that, we have the epilogue episode, where they just sort of sum everything up. I think that episode's fine, no big deal, but this is kind of the start of the switcheroo with the arcs. If you don't know what I'm talking about, in the manga, after joint training, we see Bakugo and Todoroki get their licenses and fight that carbonated water guy. And intercut with them fighting these random villains, we actually get to meet Redestro, and we get to see this company called Detnerat. And it's really cool, and I don't know if anyone noticed this, at the end of the fight with the carbonated water guy, his gauntlet explodes, and the random hero that's there explains it like, oh, he got them off the black market. But in the manga, we actually learn that this was intentional, it's so they couldn't be traced back to Detnerat, which is kind of neat. And then from there, the next chapter in the manga goes straight into MVA, and I'll talk about this when we get to MVA. But then after that, we go to Endeavor Agency, and then we continue on as normal. So in the anime, they cut the Detnerat scenes. They just had the straight Todoroki Bakugo fight, and then we went to Endeavor Agency right away. So cutting that, I'll talk about the effects later when we talk about MVA and the episodes and that. But this was kind of the start of that. After that, we get the Christmas episode, and they put in a little teaser for MVA, which is fun, but otherwise, the episode was good, ignoring the switcheroo. Aries very cute, and yeah, fun stuff. Good job establishing the next arc. Then we get into the rest of Endeavor Agency, and we reached the beginning of the problems with rearranging the arcs. So when I first watched it, because I've read the manga, I knew what Hawks was talking about every time he referenced like the Liberation Army. But now, when I was rewatching it, I was trying to go at it with the mind of someone who's never seen it before. And I personally found it very confusing because Hawks talks about it. He gives a little explanation of Destro, but otherwise, he is talking about this threat like it is something we know about. And it sort of confuses you because you kind of think, wait, did they talk about this in the past and I just forgot about it? Or what exactly is going on? And you don't know. They didn't. They rearranged things so that you don't know who they're talking about. But other than the rearrangements, the rest of Endeavor Agency is pretty good. The biggest issue is that episode 103 has a lot of flashbacks, and you can tell that they are trying to like stretch the runtime for this. Okay, then we get to the movie tie-in 104. 104 kind of puts you in a trap, because if you watch it, you are grinding the series to a halt. Because the storyline, it's a fun episode. I want to make that very clear. It's a fun episode. I like seeing the girls do their thing, but it doesn't have anything to do with anything else in the arc. And as fun as it is, you make a choice. So if you're watching it, you can choose to skip it, which leads to another problem because 105 is packed with flashbacks. And basically, if you're going from 103 to 105, you're seeing a lot of the same flashbacks very, very quickly. And if you're watching these in the same day, it kind of sucks, not gonna lie. But yeah, other than that, 104 just feels very out of place. And it's not even like the other Froppy episode in season 2, because that happened at the end of the Stain thing. The main fight was over. Deku and the others were in the hospital. We had a little tease like, ooh, villains are showing up, but other than that, the fight was basically done. So we could afford to step away and get a side story. And yeah, this one just grinds everything to a halt. It's not great, just in terms of placement. But then again, I don't know where else you could place it, because you can't put it after the end of Endeavor Agency, like after they fight ending. So yeah, I don't know where else they would do it. I personally don't think it should exist at all, but they made it. 105 is the problem episode of the season, which is a shame because it was the one I was looking forward to the most because I wanted to see Toya's baby photo. So this episode, I call it the Hellish Todoroki flashback because that's what it is. It has 8 minutes of flashbacks to scenes we have already seen. And they add some new stuff. I like that they added a scene with Endeavor talking to Fuyumi, supposedly after the sports festival. I didn't love Endeavor's beard, but I like that they added the scene. I like that we got to see a little bit of the soccer flashback from Natsuo's perspective, just a touch, just those 2 extra frames. It made me very happy because I love Natsuo, he's my boy. They added one other thing. They added an extended thing of Endeavor like teaching the kids, which is fun, but then again, if you're coming off of 102 and 103, both of those episodes are filled with Endeavor explaining things to the kids. So it's like we didn't need another montage of this. Oh, I also like that Fuyumi talks to Deku about the sports festival. I like that. I like when characters interact with each other. And I really liked that Fuyumi casually does like introductions on her job and Natsuo as a student, because this is information that only existed in the volume extras, the character pages. So I'm glad that they added those in. What else? Okay, so the flashbacks themselves, there was a lot of them. Besides the few added ones, you can tell that this episode's main goal was just to kill time. And the few added scenes, like we got a new thing of Endeavor like pushing Rei out of the way, which a good characterization, but again, it's even weirder when you consider the fact that they actually cut a scene from the manga which shows Rei trying to cool down Shoto's burn after she pours the water on him. Because the implication people got from that is that Shoto's scar is actually an ice scar, because his body should be able to handle high temperatures on that side. So it was like rapidly heated up and then immediately frozen, and that's what caused the scar to form. But they got rid of that. They just showed the empty kettle, which is so questionable anyway. Okay, so this episode I have very mixed feelings about, because on the one hand it is kind of nice to have a reference point for all things Todoroki. We see every single kid, we learn how they feel about their dad, we see how Shoto's opinion has changed from like the sports festival to now. But yeah, it was a choice. I firmly believe that if the movie tie-in didn't exist, the dinner portion of this episode could have been tacked on to 103 if they just got rid of some of the flashbacks and made some cuts. But they didn't do that, so this is what we ended up with. The one saving grace of this episode is, of course, Toya's baby photo, because he's so cute. The day this came out, I actually woke up at like 2 in the morning against my will and was just excitedly waiting to see the episode because I wanted to see how they animated him. It was so good. They animated him so cute. Anyway, beyond that, 106 ties up Endeavor Agency, and they tied up actually really well. I was very surprised. I shouldn't say surprised. I'm sorry. But it was good. It was great. I liked that they added a little line for Natsuo where he's on the phone with his girlfriend and he's like, we can see a movie. I'm like, yeah, that's a normal teenage thing to do. I think it's really easy to forget in the world of My Hero that there are people who are still just living their normal lives. And we don't see a ton of civilians, but Natsuo and Fuyumi are kind of the best example of that, because they're just doing their thing. Like, they have quirks, but they're not heroes. They're just living their life. Natsuo has a girlfriend, he goes on dates. Fuyumi's a teacher. It's kind of fun to see, and I like that they added that line. Very small detail, but I enjoyed it. And of course, the fight with Ending was cool. I sad they got rid of the shocked guy in the car as Endeavor talks to his son, but other than that, it was good. Even though, now that I've reached the end of Endeavor Agency, let me talk about something that irked me, is the animation quality. I said earlier that Joint Training had some amazing animation, and it did. Some scenes were unreasonably beautifully smooth, and others were just generally good. But I don't know, man. So starting at 102, what the heck happened? There is this one scene where Dobby's on the phone. He does not move for 14 seconds, and it looks so weird. They didn't even animate it. Dobby never looks consistent, but like that scene in particular, he's really ugly. And they leave it on screen for 14 seconds. He doesn't move, he doesn't shift, nothing. There's not even a pan. It's just that frozen image. And that episode also has a lot of like far away shots. So Endeavor welcoming the kids is like this, they're tiny little things, and the screen is shaking to show yelling, and Hawks comes in and he's just totally frozen. He's a tiny little speck next to Slide and Go. And that kind of stands out with everything else, especially with all the flashbacks, because you get the sense that they truly were just trying to save the animation budget. This is best shown, actually, through the character of Burnin. She's Endeavor's sidekick, the one with the green flame hair. Her hair, if you wondered why she looked weird, her hair is supposed to be animated because it's fire. And Endeavor's flames on his costume are always burning. They're always moving, they're waving around. And if they don't want to, the animators shut them off. But Burnin's hair is animated as just this stiff, coral-like being, and it is so weird, especially when she moves. And it's even weirder when she's next to Endeavor, and his flames are moving and she's not, because they can't just not animate Endeavor's flames, because that's like the precedent they set. But the thing with Burnin is that at the end of season 5, in like the little teaser for season 6 after the credits, her hair is animated, and I've seen clips from the 3rd movie. Her hair is animated there as well. So the fact that in her introduction her hair is not animated kind of tells me that they were trying to save the budget here. And they're like, oh, if we haven't established her hair is moving, we don't need to make it move. And you can see this in other aspects of the episode. The animation is passable, it's good. It's not outright bad, but some scenes are just weird. Anyways, that's my comment on Endeavor Agency. And I think it's a shame that they stretched it that much as well, because it was such a short and sweet arc in the manga, but whatever. Moving on to the Shirakumo episode. This is technically part of the same arc as the last episode, but because of MVA, they split it. I'll talk about the split when I talk about the last episode. But as a whole, I loved the Shirakumo episode. I love my boy. He's great. I thought it was very nice. I know they used some CGI, but I thought everything still looked really good. Aizawa looked very pretty at the end with his hair flowing around. They really like that Black Whip soundtrack too, though, I gotta say. I was kind of surprised when it popped up. I'm like, oh, did you guys not have any other option of what to put here? Or, but otherwise it was good. Shirakumo's kind of a contentious point for a lot of manga readers because he's brought up very oddly. And then it's like, if you want to know more, read Vigilantes. And I read the chapters and they're good. They absolutely should have been in the main series, but I thought the anime handled it well because I think since everything is so compact into the same episode, you get the point. I thought the episode overall did a really good job introducing him and like getting the point across that I thought was sad. I really like the scene where it shows Yue and it pans out and it shows Aizawa standing there with Shirakumo and Mike. Every time I see it, I forget what it pans out to, and I get so surprised that it's not Deku. It's fun. It's just a little detail that I love. But yeah, everything else is in the Shirakumo episode is handled really well. The animation is nice again. Yeah, that's good. Then we move on to MVA, and this is where some of the problems begin. MVA has a lot of stuff cut from the anime. I mentioned earlier the Verdestro introduction scenes that are intercut with Bakugo and Todoroki fighting. Those are all cut. One of them is kind of added back where Verdestro shows up in like a dark room and he's like, they are enemies of the Paranormal Liberation Front. But other than that, not Paranormal Liberation Front, Meta Liberation Army. Meta Liberation Army. Other than that though, everything else was cut besides that. And they also cut most of 220. They only kept the scene where Kurogiri is telling Shigaraki, like, oh, All For One left some power for you, let me go get it. And it's kind of a shame because 220 is kind of where it shows the League as like a found family or whatever, and people love that stuff. So, you know, what are you gonna do? You lose a lot of characterization on it. And you also lose a lot of context. The ultimate thing, though, with these cuts is that everything is still understandable, but impactful moments lose their impact. Those are some general thoughts. Let's go episode by episode, because each episode is such a ride. Episode 1 of MVA, so 108, is a lot. They crammed so much in there, and they cut so much. It's almost impressive how much they managed to fit in there. But the effect is that this is a very tiring episode to watch because you start it, you learn about Makia, you learn about the doctor, you learn about the Nomus, and you learn this new goal that Shigaraki has to do. He has to impress this big guy. And then you're like, okay, that's the episode. We are now going to see him try to impress the big guy. But no. Then they get a call from Redestro, who's pretending like he's an established character because they cut his introduction. And he's like, hello, yes, come get your broker. We are a very important group that has been established properly. And you're like, oh, what's going on now? And then they check the news and they're finding fingers. And it's a lot to absorb. And the result is that when you reach the end of the episode, you're like, so much happened, but also so little happened. They just threw exposition at us for 20 minutes straight. And episode 109 is Toga's fight, which has a similar-ish problem. And not really exposition, but a lot happens. So they arrive at the city, Toga starts her fight with Curious, and you realize very quickly, oh, this is gonna be what the fight is. The episode is dedicated to this one fight. If you remember back to the Overhaul episodes, it was divided very similarly, where this was the episode for Tamaki's fight, this was the episode for Kirishima's fight. And you think, oh, this is the episode for Toga's fight, cool, okay. And then Toga's fight ends, and then we're introduced to some stuff with Shigaraki. His quirk is getting stronger. And you're like, oh, okay, interesting, cool. Then Dabi gets into a scuffle with Getten. And it's like, oh, okay. And before we can expand on that, we immediately jump away to Twice finding Toga. And then we end with like, learning Skeptic's quirk. It's like, yes, he can do all these puppets. And then the episode just ends and it's just done. And it's so fast because you're like, wait a second. I sat there for 13-ish minutes of Curious just talking nonstop, only for all this information at the end to be crammed in just for setting up the next episode. And it's not good. Like, they also, from this episode, they actually cut the reason that the League was invited to the city in the first place. The goal, by the way, in case you didn't know, was that the MLA wanted to film them attacking and then catch footage of their civilians defending themselves with their quirks. And then they could submit it to the news and be like, look, our untrained civilians have used their quirks in the way Destro wanted, free quirk usage for all, in order to defeat the horrible League of Villains that's been terrorizing Japan. But they cut the line where they explain that's the goal, so the result is that they're just sort of here for unknown reasons to get the broker. It's really bad. Anyway, like, yeah, the MLA, we know the MLA wanted to kill the League because they didn't agree with them, but like, if they had their location, why not just call the heroes? And that's the whole point. That's why they invited them here. It's to show that they can do a better job than the heroes. But whatever. 110 is Twice's episode. And this is where MVA actually gets good. And in a way, it kind of makes me sad because I'm like, this is what we could have had for the past 2 episodes if they had paced it slightly better. 110 is awesome. It's a little fast, but otherwise I think it's good. I like that Twice is like, he retains his funniness, but it's also very heartfelt, which is good. And yeah, nothing else to say. Good episode. 111 is the best episode in the entire season, and you can fight me on that. The fight with Redestro is kind of boring, not gonna lie, because we don't care about Redestro. Who is this guy? He's been sitting in a tower for 3 episodes. No, 2 episodes. He's introduced in the first one, he sits in the tower for 2, and now he's here. And it's like, I don't care about this fight, but I care about the flashback. And the flashback saves the episode. It's so good. People were really concerned about censoring. I think they did a good job getting around that. I don't mind if characters kind of look like stone before they disintegrate. I'm shocked they actually showed the blood after the fact. But yeah, this episode was really good. I thought the animation was nice. I thought the voice acting was good in both the dub and the sub. And then we get to 112, which is the end of the main MVA fight. And this is the episode that suffers the most from everything that's been happening with the cuts. Because this episode, you can feel things were cut out. When I first watched it, I was watching it with my parents, and my dad made a comment where he said, Redestro is giving up because he's a coward, and it feels out of character. And I was confused because I'm like, why doesn't it feel out of character for me? And then I realized it's because they cut all the things where Redestro shows like a great appreciation for life and that he hates the unnecessary violence of like killing Mayashita and mourning for Curious. They cut all that out. So when he says in the anime, no more violence, it's senseless, it does kind of feel out of character. Aside from that, though, you also have things like him calling on this mecha suit, and you know, you kind of have to wonder, hey, where'd this come from? Because they never, before this point, fun fact, they never established he's the CEO of Detnerat, and they never explain what Detnerat is. They have one picture in episode 101, the Christmas one. No, 100, the one before the Christmas one. They show one frame of a commercial that says Detnerat to expand into hero industry. And if you're watching this and don't read Japanese and you miss the subtitles at the top, you just don't know what that is. And even then, they don't explain that Detnerat's like a support company. So it's kind of weird that all the characters keep saying like, Detnerat's patented chain ring, the 7's loud. And then he's just like, the stress inducerinator, or whatever it's called. And it's just very out of nowhere. It doesn't feel like a logical conclusion to this fight. But the fight is well animated. I like when Shigaraki's hair turns white and he's laughing because he's my boy. And I keep saying that a lot of characters. I said about Natsuo and Shirakumo, but they're all my boy. And I like seeing them happy, whatever happy looks like for them. At the end of the episode, we get the sushi scene. And they add that one bit of context in through Flashback, and I cringed so hard. That was handled so badly. I'm sorry, that's not a question. I'm glad they put it though, because I do like the sushi scene, but I wish it was established earlier on, yay. But then it ends pretty cool, like, okay, the paranormal liberation front's here, guys, how awesome. And then we get to the last episode, episode 113. So here's where it finishes up that, by the way, and like the best genius thing or whatever, Hawks is like doing his mission. And then it cuts back to the present, which is the kids training with All Might. Now, in the manga, directly after the Shirakumo stuff, this is where it went to. It went to the kids training. And because of the way the anime split it up, you can kind of forget that this is all technically happening in the same day. If not, it's happening in the same 2 days. It's very quick. But you just watched 5 episodes of something else, so you can kind of forget, like, this is connected to that. Because it shows President Mike just, like, on a couch at one point, and you kind of have to take a moment to think, wait, why is he like that? Oh, right, yeah, his friend's a Nomu. But other than that, like, aside from just the rearrangement kind of making the episode feel a little lost, the episode's good. Animation is fine, nothing insanely special. We get to learn a bit about Tomura's procedure. Oh, by the way, that was also from Endeavor Agency. They took it out of that place and put it here, which is good. I'm glad they added it back. But yeah, at the end, the last episode's good. They have a long montage showing the pro heroes, which is kind of annoying, especially when you consider how fast MVA was. Like, MVA had no flashbacks. It had none of those little recap cold open things that the joint training had. It was non-stop story because they did not have time to waste. And when you come off 5 episodes like that, and then you get to this, where they have this long montage showing every kid in Class A and every hero they interned with, it's like, oh my gosh, how did who divided this up? But then the episode ends and it's good. I think it's really weird that they didn't end on the cliffhanger, if you don't know what I'm talking about. In the manga, the anime ends on chapter 257 and takes like a little bit from the end of 258, but basically it ends on 257. And that chapter ends with this awesome cliffhanger of saying, one day in late March, the heroes disappeared from the streets. And that is so cool. And it's also referenced a little later on, like, how do I say this without spoiling anything? I'm not gonna spoil it. There's a line where they're like, if a hero is defined as blah, 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 then the heroes really did disappear from the streets that day. I'm like, okay, that's such a cool line, but if you cut the build up, where do you go from that? So yeah, I find it weird that they worked so hard to get to this point and then they didn't end it with that cliffhanger. It honestly feels like it ended kind of abruptly, in my opinion. I don't know if this is just because I was watching it on Funimation, but I never got the thing at the end saying, we'll continue in season 6. Like, for me, it just sort of ended on Deku's face. So I'll have to look into that, but otherwise, guys, that is the end of the season. My overall thoughts is that this season started off very strong, or pretty strong besides the recap, and then just sort of got progressively worse, and then it got better at the end. Am I excited for season 6? Absolutely. I really love the upcoming arc. It is one of my favorites, and I hope they do it justice. But otherwise, guys, those are my thoughts. Pretty good. Not the best. Definitely not the worst. Overall, guys, I think that just, yeah, it was okay. It was damaged by some of the choices made. We don't know why they were made, but it is what it is. Let's hope season 6 handles it a little better. That's all I have for you today, guys. I will see you guys next time. Bye-bye.